Hello again, and welcome to War Stories, behind the scenes tales from the front lines of the media. I am your host, Tom Curley. Welcome to the show. For those of you that don't know what this show is about, quite frankly, neither do we. Actually, me and good friends of mine that used to work in the business, the show business, I worked at CBS for many, many, many years. I was a director. We get together and we tell war stories, stories that stuff that actually happens, stuff that you can't make up. And one of the best people that does this and can't make stuff up is, of course, Garry Armstrong, my co-host in crime here, veteran TV reporter, Channel 7 in Boston for many, many years. Garry, how the heck are you today?
I'm fine, but I don't know whether you should use that word crime. I mean, I know we're getting close to the line with some of these shows, but listen, before we go any further, you know how some series, when they reach a certain number, 100 episodes or 200 episodes, they have a big party? Do we have a number that when
Mm-hmm.
we reach it, we're going to celebrate? Because we can have
That's
dancing dogs and strip teasers, or
that's true.
strip teasers on
That
a
is
leash
true.
and dancing. Okay.
or 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 strip teasing
What?
dogs.
I just got something from Maryland. It's a note from George Santos. You can't do
Yes,
next
yes.
week's show because uh, what? Oh, he's going to Stockholm. George Santos says he's going to Stockholm. He's going to get the Peace Prize for ethics and politics.
Wow.
I'll
That's weird.
email him back
That's a
after the show.
change of schedule. I heard that he couldn't come on the show because he was being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Um, so anyway, be- before we start, before we start, a couple of notes. Believe it or not, we've been getting comments. We've been getting fan mail, um, and here's just a couple of them. Love your show. I laughed until I stopped. Okay, I guess that's fine. More fun than an AR-15. That was from Field and Stream magazine. And oh, here's one of my favorites. I laughed. I cried. It's better than cats. Well, you take them where you can get them. But there has been some criticism, and I feel that it's only right that we tell the good with the bad. And it's about me. I'm getting numerous complaints about my attire, specifically the vest. There's a lot of comments. Hey, what's with the vest? Why always the vest every week? Lose the vest. Oh, that's from my wife Ellen. She hates the vest. So, all right, if
I
that's
just
the
want to
way
know
it
if you're
is,
washing it.
then I'm washing it. All right, okay, fine. If you guys want it, then fine. We are going to lose the uh, lose the vest. There you go. Okay.
Oh, that's a nice look.
There. Yeah. All right. I hope
That's a
you're all
nice
happy. Um,
Yeah, that's a
so
nice Dennis Hopper blue velvet outfit.
yeah, Dennis Hopper Blue. So for the last 5 weeks, we've been promoting a story that you have about Yul Brynner, and we don't get to it every week because we run out of time. Because
Right.
part of the problem with this show is we have a detailed discussion meeting before we go on the air. We decide exactly what it is that we're going to say, and then we go on the air, and we don't say any of it. But at least we're consistent. So, what do you got, Garry?
I think maybe Mr. Brenner should get his due, but the more I thought about this after we got off the show last week, I remembered a story about Yul Brenner that had not been in my brain for all these weeks. So uh, Brenner may not, wherever he's starring now, may not really be appreciative of this one. Burt Reynolds really will be the star of this one. This goes back to 1972. They were shooting a movie called Fuzz, Fuzz, in Boston, Boston proper, and the cast included Burt Reynolds, Raquel Welch, Yul Brynner, Jack Weston, Tom Skerritt, and some other people. Now, at this point, Burt Reynolds was maybe the hottest thing in movies, and his being in Boston was a really big deal. So all the cameras, all the local entertainment reporters were surrounding Burt Reynolds. The others were going after Raquel Welch, and Yul Brynner was sort of standing in the background saying, I used to be the king and I, and blah, blah, blah. That was a setting and that was a mood when I took my camera crew in. And as I've said to you before, the station I worked for didn't really uh, feel fully vested in doing entertainment stories. So I was always nudging them towards it. And again, I had to wait until the other reporters did their thing. So I was wording as Burt Reynolds finished doing several interviews with other reporters. I was looking at Raquel Welch just to look at her. And I saw Yul Brynner just sort of walking around. Someone said, Yul Brynner will not be available to you today, Garry. And I said, okay, I'll talk to Jack Weston, was a very familiar character actor and a familiar, great guy to chat with. So I was talking to Jack Weston, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw Burt Reynolds walking towards us, and he was just staring with a straight face. We wrapped up with the Jack Weston interview, and Yul Brynner started to walk over, and I thought, oh, I'm going to get Yul Brynner. But Burt Reynolds walked towards me as Yul Brynner was walking towards me, and Burt Reynolds, as Yul Brynner sat down, getting ready for us to put the mic on him, and Burt Reynolds started in, as I was saying, so good to meet you, Mr. Brynner. And Burt Reynolds walked towards the left of the camera singing, Some Enchanted Evening.
Some enchanted evening.
And he kept repeating it. And I started to giggle. And Yul Brynner just gave me that king and I look. And he looked back and he said, Burt, would you mind? I'm trying to do this interview. Oh, come on, Yul, baby. Come on. Let's have some fun with this. Burt, I'm trying to do this interview. Okay, fine. You go ahead, talk to the guy. I'll go do my stuff. And he walked away. And Yul Brynner started to talk about doing the movie Fuzz, which was, as it turned out, it wasn't a very good movie, but that's beside the point. So Brenner was into his third or fourth line about how great it was to do a contemporary movie because he had used to doing swashbucklers or movies like The Ten Commandments. And he was waxing poetically about being in old Boston. This is when we still had the elevator trains. And this is when Faneuil Hall, which is now a tourist mecca surrounding Boston City Hall, back then they still had the fresh fish markets and fresh veggie markets. So there was an aroma that pervaded the whole area, including the movie set where we were shooting. So Yul Brynner was sniffing and asking, what's that weird smell? And I said, oh, we have live fish and veggies over there. That's a historic market, sir. And he said, well, I'm used to that sort of thing where I come from. And as the moment he said that, I heard the voice again, some enchanted evening.
Some enchanted evening.
And Brenner's eyes get bigger and bigger. And then Burt Reynolds stepped in back of Yul Brynner and started giggling and said, he doesn't get it. He just doesn't get it. This is just a funny gig. This is Hollywood. Come on, Yul, baby, let's get with it. And he, Burt, I'm trying to do the interview. Okay, boy, okay, I'll walk away. So he walked away very slowly and we slapped back into the interview. And Brenner is now saying how he was using his method approach to this contemporary movie because so many people were ragging him about playing Ramesses in the Ten Commandments. And he said, I'm so sick and tired of hearing, so shall it be written, so shall it be done. I'm glad to be using modern dialogue. And, I spent some time with the Strasbergs. That was his way of saying he went to the famous acting method school in New York. And I said, I didn't realize you went to that school. And he said, well, it wouldn't be obvious from the dialogue I have in most of my movies. Some enchanted evening.
Some enchanted evening.
Now I looked up and I said, Burt, would you give us a minute, please? And he said, no one talks to me that way. Some enchanted evening. And Brenda said, that's it. I'm out of here. And he walks away. And Burt looked at me and said, would you like to do the interview? And I said, no, I want Raquel Welch. And he said, no one can talk to someone who's worked on Gunsmoke that way. Some enchanted evening.
Some enchanted evening.
Now, everyone around me is laughing as Yul Brynner is stalking away in that walk that he had, that ramrod type. And he looks at me and he says, I don't know why he walks that way. Do you think he has constipation? I said, I don't really know him that well, Bert. And he says, okay, I'll be back in a minute, dude. And he walked away. And at that point, I got the word from Boston, which was really just up the street, that they wanted me for a hard news story. And I said to Burt Reynolds, see what you've done? I missed getting an interview with the guy who played in The King and I, and also The Magnificent Seven. And Burt Reynolds looks at me and says, the old man was right, which, is one of the closing lines in the movie, The Magnificent Seven. I looked back at Burt Reynolds and I said, you came back here, a man like you, to a town like this. Why? Some enchanted evening.
Some enchanted evening.
The cameras were still rolling, and Burt Reynolds says, maybe we can try this again tomorrow. Yul Brynner came walking back and said, do you have any time for me now? And I said, no, we're locked in because of Burt Reynolds, and there's a hard news story. A fire main just blew up in the back street. And he said, you mean you're leaving me to cover a manhole explosion? And I said, we do hard news around here, Mr. Brynner. Some enchanted evening. That's when we just walked away. That's Yul Brynner part one. We'll deal with him in another story, and I promise you'll love it.
Okay. I didn't want to hear it earlier because I realized, oh my God, we've been promoting this thing for 5 episodes, and I said, holy crap, this better be good. And I mean, and we've got to top the boner episode, and the parrot running around your head going, Garry Armstrong, this is stupid. So that very, very good. I see what you say about Burt Reynolds. I was doing the floor, putting mics on and off people on the morning news, excuse me, and it was during the Phyllis George years, which were always fun because you never knew what Phyllis was going to say. And in this case, she was interviewing Burt Reynolds, and I remember I put the mic on him, and hi, Mr. Reynolds, how you doing? He said, hey, how you doing, kid? I said, I'm a big fan. Yeah, thank you. So he did the interview, and I really wish I could remember what the hell she asked him, because even for Phyllis, it was out there. And all I remember was when the interview was over, I came back to take the mic off of Burt, and he just looks at me and he goes, is she for real? And I went, welcome to my world. And he laughed. He patted me on the shoulder. He said, good luck, kid. And he walked out. So, he obviously had a sense of humor, but even he was just like, what the hell are you talking about? So that was wonderful. So let's go to part 2. What was the other story? We're on a roll.
Part two is about a decade later, as I said. At this point, Yul Brynner was doing a road show production of The King and I. He took it all across the country, and he was back in Boston, and we were sent to, and the interview was scheduled. So we went to the theater where he was working, and we were shown into his dressing room, and it was late afternoon. Well, I don't know what that has to do with the story anyway, but I mentioned that because it was close to showtime. We were shown to the dressing room, and Tom, the whole room was done up in black. I believe then, and I still believe 40 or 50 years later, that he was still riffling in his mind the role that he played in The Magnificent Seven and some of the spaghetti westerns that followed, where he was all dressed in black, and he was known at that time as the Man in Black. So the entire wardrobe, the entire room was done in black. The ceilings, the walls, the floors, the lights had been dimmed down. And I explained to him that we needed to put some TV lights up so that we could see each other. And he said, well, I don't need any light. I'm Yul Brynner. I photographed very well in dim light. And I said, but you don't understand. My skin color, just I won't be there. And he said, I don't understand what you're saying. And the cameraman said, Mr. Brynner, we need some more light so that both of you can be seen. It will be natural lighting. And he said, well, they don't do this in Hollywood. I said, this is Boston. And he said, what do you mean by that? And the cameraman said, Garry, tell him where the light will be. And Brynner looked up, and as he's looking up and mumbling something, and I wasn't quite sure what he was saying, I couldn't help. I said, the old man was right. And he looks back at me and said, what? I said, the old man was right. Only the farmers won. We lost. We'll always lose.
The old man was right. Only the farmers won. We lost. We'll always lose.
And he said, son of a gun, I did that movie. I said, I know. And Steve McQueen was really good in that. And he just looked at me and said, well, I said, don't get mad. I was just riffing you. I loved you. I loved you when you did South Pacific. I didn't do South Pacific. Well, that's what Burt Reynolds said. And then someone in the background started singing, Some Enchanted Evening. And he said, damn it, I'm sick and tired of this stuff. I'm an Academy Award winning star. Why don't you people treat me better?
Some enchanted evening.
And I looked at him and said, we dealing with that. And he said, that's it. Let's do this damn interview and wrap it up. So we do the interview and we're wrapping it up. And he said to me, Mr. Armstrong. And I said, make it Garry, Yul. I didn't say you could call me Yul. All right, make it Mr. Armstrong. And he said, what is with you people? And you could hear the voice in the background again, some enchanted evening.
Some enchanted evening.
And with that, the PR guy comes in and says, fellas, I think you've done as much as you can do here. Thank you for stopping by. And we walked away. And you could hear Yul Brynner whistling Some Enchanted Evening. Yul Brynner.
Okay.
Gosh.
Gosh
almighty.
I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. That was actually worth the wait. Although
I don't know how we got
really
a piece cut out of it. We did.
That is so funny. Some people just don't have a sense of humor. I mean, it is sad. They just, they can't take a joke, or what's worse is they don't get the joke. So changing topics. When you were, working at Channel 7, did they, whenever a new anchor came in, did they cater specifically to this person, i.e., build a new set? Were they constantly changing the set?
Yes. I was thinking when you were telling this story, if it was last week or the week before last, about how CBS changed their sets and changed everything in the studio. Every time you got a new anchor, we had a repeating door. Now during the 31 years, I frankly I love telling the story. Not only to it behooves myself because I lasted a long time as a reporter there, but during the 31 years I spent at Channel 7, they had almost the same number of A, news directors, B, anchor people. I mean, it was like a revolving door. And every time somebody new came in, they changed the news set. They changed the set for the weather section. They also changed the section for the sports. It was, I don't know how much money they spent on set changes over the course of the years, but they were always crying poverty when it came contract time. They would always say, well, we spent all our money in this and that and everything, and we don't have the money for you people. In my case, as shop steward for the after crew, they made it so difficult until I finally dragged in as shop steward. I dragged in the paperwork on the money they spent for building new sets, and that almost got me fired because you were not supposed to go up against the suits when you were talking about money. But yeah, we had a lot of set changes.
Okay, the reason I bring it up is
it never made the shows better. It never drove the ratings up.
No, of course not. A new animation package and new music never changes anything, but it gives the director a chance to justify his phony baloney job. So on the evening news, what was hysterical is not only would they change the set, but they would never consult a director, maybe the director, but they would never consult the technicians about the feasibility. And I have a couple of classic examples that I love. The first when Dan first, I think it's when he first took over the show, or when we moved from the Walter Cronkite studio, which was a little studio, and moved to, we created a whole studio for him, Studio 47, big giant room, and they had this big expansive set. And two of the cool things was the set was, there was a second floor, okay, and on the second floor they had a marble floor, and it was circular, and you could look down on the whole evening news set. And they had an elevator, this special elevator that went up one floor. It spent like $1 million. And the whole thing was probably
Wow.
like $35 million in that range. But they spent $1 million, I seem to remember, on this elevator. And here was the deal. During the show, when they wanted to, they would disconnect, excuse me, one of the cameras, and put it on the elevator. The elevator would go up to the second floor. They would plug the camera back in, and then that camera could truck back and forth and get these great beauty shots and bumper shots, okay? But there was only two small problems. Problem number one, the elevator made an insane amount of noise, all right? And it took about a minute or two to go up one floor. Because I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but the speed of an elevator is inversely proportional to the number of floors that it has to go up. If it has to go up 100 floors, it goes about 1,000 miles an hour. It has to go up 3, it takes 10 minutes. So the noise was so bad that they couldn't do it while they were on the air, so they could only do it during the commercials. But then the problem was is that by the time the elevator got up there, they really didn't have time to plug the camera in. But they didn't have time to plug the camera in either, because here was the really big thing. This was back in the 80s, all right, when cameras were, they were NTSC, which stands for Never the Same Color, and they were huge. These big professional $100,000 cameras that had, the plug was like this big, and it had a dozen different wires. Now, when you unplug one of these cameras, and then you plug it in somewhere else, the video guy has to repaint the entire camera. And this is a process that takes about 20 minutes. So they spent millions of dollars on this thing, never, ever used it, never once, because it was completely unfeasible. Now, you would think that, why didn't, oh my God. Joey, I'll call you back. I'm actually on the air. This is real, people. That is Joe Marcus. Joe Marcus is a guy I've talked about, and he's going to be on our show, hopefully maybe next week. He was the head audio guy for the morning news for years, and he's got the greatest stories. My old partner in crime, you will love him. I can't believe that he called while we were on the air. So anyway, that was the first thing. And then a number of years later, they decided to change the set again. And in this case, they created Dan's desk on this big lazy Susan, all right, that would revolve, okay? And it was motorized, okay? And the set could revolve so that then you could shoot Dan with this background, and then with that background, and then in that background. But the real reason that they did it was because it was motorized. They could fire some stagehands, and they could save money, because they were always trying to cut costs. So, and it was a brilliant idea, except for one small problem. It didn't work. It never worked. So in order to, by now they had built the set, so they had to use it. So they had to hire more stagehands to physically move the set to get the different angles that they wanted.
Oh, I'm just going to say this story sounds so familiar, not only because it happened on the local level, as I've said already, but I am thinking that I heard almost this exact same story that you're telling from Walter Cronkite. This would be back in the late 70s. So as I've told you earlier, Walter Cronkite used to dock his boat on Martha's Vineyard, and he was up in Boston Harbor for the bicentennial, and he had a bunch of reporters on his boat for R&R, and he was basically sharing stories. But one of the stories he shared sounded just like the story you told. And Walter Cronkite was saying, the previous day he had been trying to cut a commentary for Channel 7, which I think was CBS back then. And he said they were moving the set around on him, and he couldn't cut his piece until they had finished, which was like 45 minutes later. And I just shook my head and then said, that happens to us every day. And he said, well, it happened back at CBS Net. And he was saying it had gotten so bad that he came in one day to sit down and work on a story. He went to his typewriter, which dates it, and then he went to a drawer to find his bowl of pipe tobacco in his pipe, and they were gone. And he started asking around, who took my pipe? He said, they took everything out of my desk. They took all of my scripts away. And I asked why, and he said, well, because we're changing the set again because there are going to be new anchor additions. And he said, but I'm the anchor. And they said, yeah, but we don't know how much longer. And he said, do you realize who you're talking to? And they said, you're, Walter Cronkite. And the sets are still being changed. And he said, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter who you are. It just goes on and goes on and goes on. So if Walter Cronkite had to deal with it.
Oh, yeah. That's probably
it's curious.
That probably could very well have been at the time. Everybody doesn't understand why Walter Cronkite left. Walter Cronkite did not retire. Yeah. Walter Cronkite was retired because back then CBS had a rule. It was a hard and fast rule. It was mandatory retirement when you turned 65. And there were no exceptions, none. Frank Stanton, the original president of CBS News, turned 65. Bill Paley, the founder of CBS, out. Walter Cronkite, 65. Now, you got to understand, at 65, Walter Cronkite was CBS News was the #1 rated show in the country.
Yes.
He was the most trusted man in America.
And he was really, really trusted. He was Lyndon Johnson, among other people, and even Nixon referred to Walter Cronkite as the beacon of trust.
But 65, out. Okay. Now, this was stupid, yes, until Bill Paley turned 65. And then he went, we don't need to do this rule anymore. And then I think later Congress passed a law. I think it's illegal for a company to mandatorily fire you at 65. But that's what they did. So now they had to create the new most trusted man in America. And it was a competition, believe it or not. It was Bob Trout, Roger Mudd, and Dan Rather. And Dan Rather won the race. So that could have been at the time when they were, realizing
I think it probably was, yes.
Probably was. Walter was on his way out, and maybe they hadn't gotten around to telling him that, you're on your way out. Again, to this day, one of the dumbest things that, I think that they ever did.
It clearly was in the wind. I don't mean to say that we knew that he was on the way out, but clearly he knew that things had changed and not for the better. And it was like your professor talking to you and saying, enjoy it while you can. Your complaints, they're widespread. And essentially what he was saying is, if you like what you're doing, if you love your business, you're just going to have to gut it out and be ready for when your day comes. And of course, back then, most of us were 30-somethings. We just simply didn't think it could happen to us. How stupid can you be, or how narrow vision can you be? But when you work in the news, whether you're talent or behind the camera, you think you're going to be there forever. But you're not going to be there forever.
Oh. No, you do. That is the weirdest thing about this business. I swear to God, every show I ever worked on, there was just because you would be on a show for 5 years, 6 years, and there would be this, we're going to be doing this forever. And then one day you'd go into work and it was gone, canceled. Now you think we would expect that, but we didn't. It was always like that.
No.
Well, anyway, We did it again. We not only managed to waste another half hour of airtime, but we did get the Yul Brynner story in. So of course now it is
He
time
should be
for
happy.
he should be happy. It's time for the mandatory plugs. My co-podcast, Get Off My Lawn, with hey boy, that vest looks familiar. Where we talk about life, the universe, and whatever the hell else I want to talk about. And then, of course, there is, let's see here, what do we have here? Our podcast that your wife Marilyn hosts and we both contribute to, Serendipity, Seeking Intelligent Life on Earth. A Sisyphusian task, if there ever was one. Not sure if Sisyphusian is a word. And a half-hour radio show, my audio theater company for the best in audio theater and drama. And a half-hour radio show, the cult hit from the 80s, is not only back, it's still here. And trust me, it is hilariously funny for about a half hour. So anyway, we did it again. Without having the Yul Brynner story to tease, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do.
Right. And
next
just
week.
remember,
But
just remember what Curly said in City Slickers. The answer is, that's it.
Okay,
If you do that,
okay.
we'll be successful. We will be so successful if we keep remembering this.
And on that note, F diminished. See ya.
Some enchanted evening.